I have a topic to discuss with you today. It's titled Spiritual Disciplines, but this is not only about spiritual disciplines. This is about the history of the Christian church and the infiltration of Satan into its midst. And I don't even know where to begin, except to say that many people have been deceived over the centuries. And, well, let me just get into it. And because that's the best way to tell you, I guess, is to go from my notes. Many believe that in order to live an authentic Christian life and to understand the true teachings of our faith, it's necessary to look to ancient Christianity and the writings of those that learned directly from the first apostles. They point us to people like Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Ignatius Loyola, Augustine, and many others. And for the spiritual disciplines, they encourage us, even urge us, to follow the practices of certain early Christians or even some somewhat later Christians, and imitate their practices in order to have an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. But should we follow the ancient Christians, and were their teachings truly scriptural? Now, Jesus and the apostles warned us that false teachers would come into the church, and false Christians, and that these false anointed ones, or false Christs, would even do miracles by the power of Satan. I'm going to read to you a few scriptures here that bring this out. 1 Timothy 4:1, Now the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and the teachings of devils. Seducing spirits means spirits that lead astray. Jesus warned us in Mark 13:6, For many shall come in my name, saying, I am, and shall deceive many. Now your text may read, I am Christ, but it doesn't say that there. They added that because of what it says a little further on. So many shall come in my name, saying, I am, and shall deceive many. Now, they could be just saying, many will come in my name saying that Christ was. But then he goes on, in Mark 13:22, he says, For false Christs and false prophets shall arise, and shall show signs and miracles to lead astray, if possible, even the elect or the chosen of God. The word Christ means anointed in the Greek, so this is basically talking about people who would come in Christ's name claiming to be anointed ones. And then in Matthew 7:22-23, he says, Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, and in your name cast out devils, and in your name done many mighty or many miraculous works? And then I will profess to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice iniquity, or sin, or transgression of the law. And then 2 Peter 2:1-13, he says, But there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who shall secretly bring in damnable heresies. Damnable heresies, that's heresies that lead to damnation. They are spots and blemishes, sporting themselves in their own deceivings while they feast with you. So this is people who are in the church, fellowshipping with other Christians, who would secretly bring in damnable heresies. Now, many in our generation consider these prophetic warnings to be for events still in our future. But Paul specifically warned that some of the early bishops, some of the earliest overseers of the church, would pervert the teachings of Christianity. Listen to what he says in Acts 20 through 25 to 31. He's saying to them that he's leaving. He says that he's clean from the blood of all men because he is not held back from proclaiming to them the whole gospel. And then he says, watch over you. Well, I'll just read it to you. Take heed, therefore, to yourselves. Take heed means to beware, watch out. Keep your eyes open, be on guard. To yourselves and to all the flock over which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. And he says that grievous wolves will enter in among you. But then he says, also of your own selves shall men rise up, speaking perverted things, to draw away disciples after them. Therefore, watch, he says it again, be on guard, keep your eyes open, and remember that for 3 years I did not stop warning every one of you night and day with tears. For 3 years I did not stop warning you night and day with tears, that even some of you would rise up and pervert the teachings and lead disciples away after you. This is serious, people. And it's not just for the future, which I'm going to show you. Not only do we know that because the last times is not just our future. The last times was from the very times of the apostles. In these last days, he has spoken to us through his Son. The last days is the last age of humanity on the earth before the Lord sets up his kingdom forever. In 60 AD, Buddhism was introduced from India to China. And around the time of John's death, around 100 AD, trade routes called the Silk Roads were established from China to India and as far west as Rome. This spread Buddhism and Hinduism throughout the Roman Empire and also influenced the Greek teachings, and the Greek teachings influenced Buddhism and Hinduism. Okay, so these three major ways of believing in God or believing in the universe all joined together and blended with each other. In 130 AD, only 30 to 31 years after the death of the Apostle John, Justin Martyr showed hints of the Greek neoplatonism. Neoplatonism was a revival of the teachings of Plato with some additions thrown in. And Justin Martyr showed some hints of this belief in his teachings when he taught that Jesus Christ was a separate being and a different God from the maker of all things. This is a reflection of that pagan teaching, as I said, found in Neoplatonism and in the Eastern religions. Neoplatonism is a school of philosophy based on the teachings of Plato and Plotinus, and it says that all things, including other gods and goddesses, are manifestations of the source of creation and emanate from it. Source is also known as the good, the beautiful, the absolute, the all, and the truth. It's considered to be an unconscious, impersonal energy that produces all conscious beings, all of creation as manifestations of itself. Plotinus taught the existence of an indescribable one, or the source, which is a reality that is transcendent or beyond all thought. The original being initially emanates a divine consciousness, which is sort of a shared mind which humanity could access, called the nous. There's another one after that, but we're not going to go into all that detail. This universal consciousness is a perfect reflection, he said, of the one, but is distinct from it. It was not the one, but it was a perfect reflection or emanation of the one. So basically, it's a reflection or an image of God. It's a conscious being and an intellect, sometimes referred to by these Platonists as logos. Now you got to understand, they didn't take this from Christianity. The logos means intelligence, and intelligence that can be described in words. So he said that this being that was emanated from the universal energy was a conscious and intellectual being, the intellect being logos. It's an energy that manifests the world, or a being that manifests the world. The original being also emanated not only this universal consciousness, but the rest of the universe as a sequence of lesser beings. Later Neoplatonic philosophers added hundreds of intermediate gods, angels, and demons, and other beings as emanations of God that were intermediaries between the one and humanity. Now, the idea is that human souls always existed as spirit beings also, but that they've fallen by ceasing to contemplate the divine, and they are now in bodily form as a result. In other words, by stopping this contemplation of the divine, they fell. That was a sin in a sense, and now they're in bodily form as a result, and trapped by sensuality and overpowered by desires or lust. And the teaching is that they must turn back from this. They say that no being is evil, simply lacking in some good, which is considered imperfection. And the way back to perfection on earth is through philosophical contemplation. Now, in order to return to the all, or the absolute, or the one, the source, the soul must travel the same road by which it fell. Remember, it fell by stopping contemplation of the divine. So in order to be restored, they practice virtues, because they're going backwards track, okay? So we fell, and then we got overcome by these, we fell through stopping divine contemplation, and then we stopped practicing virtues when we got overcome by sensuality or sensual pleasures and the lusts or desires of the flesh. So they're backtracking. They say the first thing is to practice the civil virtues and get rid of basically those lustful desires or sensual pleasures, and this purification comes through ascetic practices. Ascetic practices, now fasting is biblical, but not all of their practices were. But that's one example of an ascetic practice. Is basically they were trying to subject the body, to force it to obey them, and to get rid of all these fleshly desires through these practices. And that was supposed to deliver the soul from the sensuality and desires of the flesh. And then last of all were the divine virtues, and these are called spiritual disciplines. This is a lot of information to cover, and we're not going to be able to cover it in one sitting. But I hope that you will join me in the next section as I go into more detail about what the early Greeks believed and taught, and these teachings got mixed in with Christianity, and I want you to be able to see that. So I really hope that you will continue with me in this series. So join me for part 2.